A very good day, everyone, and thank you so much for joining us for the side sessions of the third UN South Asia Forum on Business and Human Rights. This session is going to be focusing on promoting business and human rights in South Asia's small-scale fisheries, and it is hosted by the TROSA and OXFAM. So we're very excited to have this upcoming session. We're really glad that you were able to join us. A note that the session is being recorded and that we are also live on YouTube. Just a few things before we get started. One is because we want to make this a nice interaction where we can see each other. If you come in to speak, perhaps you're part of a Q&A or you're one of the speakers, we do ask that you turn on your webcam when you speak, if you can do that. It's very much appreciated. Number two is for any thoughts that you'd like to share or questions that you might have, there is at the bottom of your screen the chat button, so you can use that at any time during this session. You can click the chat button and write into that. And we also have the raise hand button, right? So if you click the reactions button at the bottom of your screen, you will see this raise hand button right here, which will allow you to raise your hand and potentially ask questions. Now, for today's session, what I'd like to do is I'd like to pass the floor over to Jyotiraj Patra, who is a project manager at OXFAM, and he will be helping facilitate this session. So Raj, over to you.
Thanks, Carl. Thank you so much for all the support and with the technicalities. Welcome everyone to the session on promoting business and human rights in South Asia small-scale fisheries, opportunities for sub-regional multi-stakeholder cooperation. At the very beginning, I must thank the UNDP Business and Human Rights team for this opportunity for Oxfam and others to be part of this forum and helping us with this side session. My name is Raj. I work for Oxfam, the Transboundary Rivers of South Asia program, which is a CEDA-funded program working on regional water governance issues in the Ganges, Brahmaputra, and Meghna basins in South Asia, and in the Salween in Myanmar. Today's session, we are going to focus on some of the relations and insights from the TROSA program, but we also have colleagues from non-TROSA. We have colleagues who are working in other organizations. And before I introduce the panel, please allow me to briefly set the scene for today's discussion. So as we all know, small-scale fisheries are key to the economic well-being and food security of millions. And as per the latest Food and Agriculture Organization statistics, the state of the fisheries, of the 59.51 million people engaged in small-scale fisheries globally, 80% of them are in Asia and 14% of them are women. Many of those engaged in fishing and fish farming across South Asia are small-scale, artisanal fishers and aquaculture workers, and are very often informal in nature. Human rights of small-scale artisanal fishers, these fish farmers and fish workers are often not duly recognized and protected in existing small-scale fisheries governance mechanisms and investment decisions, and that is where the role of the business and human rights comes into play. These small-scale fisheries are also at great risk of overharvesting due to ever-increasing market demands and threatened due to climate change impacts. Importantly, as we all know, the Food and Agriculture Organization, they have also declared 2022 as the International Year of Artisanal Fisheries and Aquaculture, which was launched last year to illuminate the contribution of the small-scale aquatic food sector to sustainable development. And it is this in this increasing context of vulnerability of the small-scale fisheries and the fish workers and farmers engaged in these small-scale fisheries that we are going to discuss about the scope and opportunities for business and human rights, more responsible and inclusive business practices in small-scale fisheries. And to do this, we have a fantastic panel with us today coming from diverse backgrounds, working on these issues at different levels, at the local level, at the sub-regional level, and also at the national level. Very briefly on today's session plan, this session will have 4 subsections. The first one will be for the speakers to share their insights. The first part, they will share the experiences from their ongoing and existing work. So this is more on the issues that they are going to highlight. The second section will be more on the solutions. So in terms of highlighting some of the key opportunities, what they have experienced while working at different levels. And we would, the third section will be more on question and answer. So we would like to invite all of you to please share your thoughts and ideas and questions in the chat box. And we will try and engage with as much the question and answer as we can. And the last section will be a brief wrap up from my end. So with this brief introduction and the background, I would like to first invite Ms. Shanta Soheli Moina. Shanta is a natural resources specialist working in Oxfam, Bangladesh, and she has been engaged in the small-scale fisheries issues at the local level in Bangladesh for quite some time. And Moina, if I can invite you to share your experience of the way the small-scale fisheries value chain, some of the actors involved, particularly at the local level, and how what are the issues related to their the business and human rights from your own perspective. So over to you, Moina.
Thank you, Rajbhai, for giving me the floor. So hello, everyone. So I'm Moina, and I work in Oxfam in Bangladesh. As Rajbhai already said, as a natural specialist. So I'll be talking about from my experience that I have in the project Transboundary Rivers of South Asia. So as I am talking about the fisheries, so I will be talking about the capture fisheries, not the cultural fisheries. So if we see about the fishing value chain in this capture fisheries, so there are several steps like the grassroots fisher folks brings those their catches to the landings, and there are small wholesaler, and then those fishes goes to the big wholesaler, and then in different types of we call it in Bangla mukam. So and from that the fish goes to several fishing market, and from fishing market they goes to hawker center and ultimately to the consumers. So within this whole process, so there are the price of fish is added in each steps, and of course the grassroots fisher folks don't have that added value from their catches. So if I talk about who are the stakeholder in this fisheries business, so there are of course fisheries businessmen who collect fishes and sales, and also the boat and the net owner and the ice factory owners for the post-harvesting process of fishes, and the net factory owner and other government level management agencies like Department of Fisheries, Ministry of Fisheries and Livestock, like that, and civil society organizations and NGOs who works with the fisher folk community. And if we can think about the associated risk about it, so I would like to first talk about the conflicts of the using the common pool resources. So there are huge construction industries in here in Bangladesh. So and for that industry, sand is in huge demand, and so this sand is extracted from the river, and as we can already assume that also fishing is also done in the river. So so fisheries habitat are being extracted actually when we are extracting the sand. So I mean the sand bits, so there is a conflict of the resource by two different type of businesses. One is, so the conflict is between the fishing business and the conflict with the sand businesses. So and also like the most of the fisher community, they lives near the river bank, and the due to the sand extraction, their habitats are also being eroded. So hence they have to migrate it, and that impact on their fishing activities. And also these fisher folks cannot speak against those sand miners, as there are some political influences and political influences involved. So obviously the conflict is very evident. And there are also this fisheries management that a government in Bangladesh apply 4 types of different ban periods. So if we think that who are actually being impacted in the ban period. So in ban period, the fishing is illegal, but as fisher folks goes to the river and they catch fishes. So there are some actions of law enforcement agencies, and the grassroots fisher folks, as the grassroots fisher folks voices are not included while making the decisions regarding this fisheries management. And also fish businessmen and their investments are already there from the informal business sector. So the time the fishing is, the fisher folks are doing the fishing in that time, which government actually consider illegal. But if we think that who are in the front to confront those law enforcement agencies, those are the grassroots fisher folks. So there are incidents of assaulting, even killing also in this ban period. So adding to that, there are also some types of nets, those are banned to use during fishing, like monofilament gill net. But the production of these illegal nets are not stopped. So what is the point if a point of stopping fisher folks from fishing, and we still keep producing those illegal nets? And also that we have evidence by our project that the income is not sufficient from the fisher folks. And so there are issues of rights to work and also the rights to employment. And there are no strong legal aid. So overall, workers' rights is absent in the fisheries management. And if we think about the women fisher folks are not even recognized as fisher folks, let alone their rights as a fisher folk and the recognition of their contribution in the fishing business process. So what we do in our TROSA project, that we at least try to open this discussion, try to start with this discussion. As you know, that fisheries management is a popular as an environmental issues, but we have to acknowledge that this is also a human rights issue. So this discussion is already absent, and the link between the business sector or the private sector, with this fisheries management, this discussion is not also there. So what we do from the TROSA project, that we try to bring all the stakeholders in a platform so that they can discuss with each other, like government stakeholders with the private stakeholders, private stakeholders with the community with the CSOs, like that. So I hope my other teammates will also elaborate a lot of things. So I'll stop here. Thank you, Rajbhai.
Thank you, Moina. Thank you for bringing up the examples from the work on the ground, particularly the way you highlighted. While talking about fisheries and the business and human rights, you also need to take account of the other sectors or economic activities taking place. For example, you highlighted sand mining. That's a very good example of how the other sector is affecting the fisheries sector. But most importantly, the point you raised about women fisher folk, which is still a major gap from what you highlighted in your presentation. They are still not recognized in the whole fisheries value chain, although they play a very active role. And I think that is one area where we can further delve deep in the next session on solutions. So thank you, Moina, so much for your experiences and insights. And staying on in Dhaka, I will now turn to Ms. Farjana Akhtar. Farzana is a young woman entrepreneur. She is the founder of River Fish, which is an online platform connecting the fishers with the consumers, and she has been actively engaged in this space as an entrepreneur, and she's going to highlight some of her own experiences of working in this fisheries value chain and the areas where she felt there are opportunities for business and human rights engagement and more awareness. Farzana will be speaking in Bangla, but my colleague Nushat from Oxfam Bangladesh will help us with the translation. So over to you, Farzana and Nushat.
ধন্যবাদ। ধন্যবাদ এবং সবাইকে শুভেচ্ছা জানাচ্ছি আজকের এই আয়োজনটির জন্য। আমি ফারজানা, আমি বাংলাদেশের ঢাকা কেন্দ্রিক একটি অনলাইন বিজনেসের সঙ্গে জড়িত এবং আমাদের এই বিজনেসটা মূলত মাছ নিয়ে, সেটা আমরা মানে ন্যাচারাল ফিশ নিয়ে, যেটা বিভিন্ন নদী, হাওর, বিল থেকে পাওয়া যায় বা আসে জেলেদের মাধ্যমে, আমরা সেগুলো কালেক্ট করি এবং ভোক্তাদের কাছে পৌঁছে দিই। পাশাপাশি যেটি চাষ করা হয় যেই মাছগুলো, সেই মাছগুলো নিয়েও আমরা কাজ করি। এখন কাজ করতে গিয়ে যেটা আমরা দেখেছি যে প্রথমত এখানে জেলেদের অধিকারের কথা যদি বলে থাকি, যে এই জায়গাটাতে ওরা একেবারেই মানে খুব বেশি রকম ভাবে তারা মানে অধিকারচ্যুত হচ্ছে। একটা বিষয়, তারা মাছ ধরছে কিন্তু মাছের ন্যায্য দামটা যেমন পাচ্ছে না, তেমনি তাদের শ্রমের যে মর্যাদাটা সেটাও তারা পাচ্ছে না। এবং পাশাপাশি যখন এটা ভোক্তাদের কাছে আমরা পৌঁছে দিচ্ছি, তখন আবার ভোক্তারা যে দামটা হওয়া উচিত সেই দামে ভোক্তারা পাচ্ছে না। এর একটা প্রধান যে কারণ, সেই প্রধান কারণটি হচ্ছে মাঝখানে এটা যে একটা সিস্টেম, আমাদের দেশে সেটাকে বলা হয় যে মোকাম বা আড়তদার, এই একটা বিজনেস আছে যেটা একটা আসলে সিন্ডিকেটের হাতে চলে গেছেন। তারাই হচ্ছে এর মালিকানা এবং তার দাম নির্ধারণ, বাজার নির্ধারণ সবকিছু একচেটিয়া ভাবে দখল করে আছেন। একদিকে তারা জেলেদেরকে কম দাম দিচ্ছেন, মানে একদিকে হচ্ছে জেলেরা মানে কম দামে তাদের কাছে বিক্রি করতে বাধ্য হচ্ছে, আবার তাদের এই আড়ত থেকে নিলামে অংশ নিয়ে আমরা যখন কেনাকাটা করছি, ছোট ছোট ক্ষুদ্র ব্যবসায়ীরা, তাদেরকে উচ্চ মূল্যে কিনতে হচ্ছে, যে কারণে তারাও বাধ্য হচ্ছে যে ভোক্তাদেরকে এটি মানে যে দামটা হওয়া উচিত ন্যায্য দাম, সেই দামটা আসলে আমরাও দিতে পারছি না। এই একটা মানে সিস্টেমে একটা সমস্যা রয়ে গেছে। আর আরেকটা দিক আমরা যেটা বলবো, আমরা চেয়েছিলাম যে সরাসরি জেলেদের কাছ থেকে কেনাকাটা করতে, সেখানে জেলেদেরকে হয়তো তাদের যে দামটা হওয়া উচিত, যে দামটা তাদের পাওয়া উচিত, সেটা যেন দেয়া যায়, কিন্তু এটি সম্ভব হচ্ছে না। তার একটি বড় কারণ হচ্ছে যে মোকাম ব্যবসায়ীরা আছেন, তারা জেলেদেরকে জাল, নৌকা এগুলো তৈরির জন্য মানে একটা নির্দিষ্ট পরিমাণ অর্থ তারা দিয়ে থাকেন, কারণ জেলেদের সেই রকম আর্থিক কোনো সাপোর্ট নাই। তো এই যখন এই জাল নিয়ে, নৌকা নিয়ে জেলেরা হচ্ছে তাদের কাছ থেকে নিয়ে কাজ করতে বাধ্য হয়, মাছ ধরতে বাধ্য হয়, তখন জেলেরা সেই নির্দিষ্ট পার্সন যাদের কাছ থেকে তারা এই টাকাটা নিয়েছে, তাদের কাছে মাছটা বিক্রি করতে বাধ্য হয় তাদের দামে। এখানে জেলেরা কোনো দাম ধরতে পারে না। আর এই একই সিস্টেমে আমাদেরকেও তাদের কাছ থেকে কেনাকাটা করতে হয়। এখানে একটি কথা আমি বলতে চাই, যেমন ধরেন হচ্ছে জেলে, আমি একটু তাহলে ট্রান্সলেট করে নিই। ওকে, আপনি তো বলেন যে ট্রান্সলেট করছি। জি,
okay. Rajbhai, I will translate in the meanwhile. So what is Farzanapa is trying to say that Farzanapa owns an online business on river fishes. So through their enterprise, they collect fishes from rivers and also other natural habitats like haors, fields, and other natural water habitat. So the problem they have seen that fisher folks, they can to some extent catch fishes, but they do not get the fair price of the fishes, and also their labor rights are being violated since they are not being formally contracted. So their security and their other benefits that a formal employee or a formal employee gets, they are actually deprived of that. Also, Farzanapa mentioned that even though their enterprise tries to buy directly fishes from the fisher folks. They cannot, because there is a middleman involved in this, which is locally known as aroddar in Bangla, and English is called stockist, I guess, right? So what happens in that process is that when this process is syndicated, this process syndicated. So fisher folks don't have any choice but to sell their fishes at a very low price to this stockist. Apart from that, since this stockist also gives them some kind of financial support in times of danger, they're bound to actually sell their fishes at such a low price because they do not have much negotiating capital. And at the same time, even though this enterprise like River Fish wants to sell their fishes to their consumers at a fairer price or at a reasonable price, they cannot do, because they have to buy the fishes from the stockist at a high rate, which is actually determined by those syndicated, and it's very difficult to make this process. So that's what Farzana Appa has been discussed so far. Farzana Appa will move on. Thank you.
আরেকটি বিষয় নিয়ে আমি কথা বলতে চেয়েছিলাম, সেটা হচ্ছে জেলে যারা আছেন বাংলাদেশে সাধারণত নদী নালাগুলোতে মাছ ধরছেন, তাদের কেউ তাদেরকে নিয়োগ করেন না, বা আড়তদাররা যে তাদের যে নৌকা বা জাল দিচ্ছেন, এক্ষেত্রেও কোনো নিয়োগের কোনো পদ্ধতি নাই যে এই জেলেরা তাদের অধীনে কাজ করবে, সে কারণে তারা কোনো নিয়োগপত্র পাবে। তো যে কারণে হয় কি, এই সময়টা যখন তারা কাজ করে, মানে জাল দিয়ে যখন মাছ ধরে, এই সময় তারা যদি কোনো অসুস্থতায় ভোগে, কোনো হচ্ছে তাদের কোনো বড় রকমের রোগ হয়, সে জায়গাতে তারা কোনো চিকিৎসা সহায়তা, চিকিৎসা সুবিধা এই আড়তদার বা সিন্ডিকেটের কাছ থেকে পায় না। তার কারণ হচ্ছে তাদেরকে কোনো নিয়োগপত্র দেওয়া হয় না। এখানে কাজের সময়সীমার কোনো বাইন্ডিংস, মানে কোনো রকম সময় নাই, নির্ধারিত সময় নাই। তাদেরকে হচ্ছে যখন মাছ ধরার সিজন চলতে থাকে, তখন লম্বা সময় ধরে তাদের এই কাজটি করে যেতে হয়। এই সময় প্রতিকূল আবহাওয়া, সাগর নদীতে নানা রকম ঝড়ের সময় প্রতিকূল আবহাওয়ার সম্মুখীন হয়ে অনেক জেলে মারাও যায়। তো তখন তাদের পরিবারও এই তার যে কাজ করতে গিয়ে মারা গেলেন, এই কারণে মানে সিন্ডিকেট বা আড়তদার তাদের কাছ থেকে কোনো রকম বেনিফিটস পান না, বা কোনো ক্ষতিপূরণ তারা দাবি করতে পারেন না। আবার আরেক দিকে যদি আমি বলতে চাই যে সরকারি সহায়তার কথা, তাহলে এই ক্ষেত্রেও আমি বলবো যে জেলেদের আসলে মানে এইরকম মানবাধিকার বা এই ধরনের কোনো পরিচয় গড়েই উঠে নাই যে তাদের হচ্ছে দেশের নাগরিক হিসেবে একটা বিশেষ সুযোগ সুবিধা, শিক্ষা বা স্বাস্থ্য সেবা, এই মৌলিক চাহিদাগুলো পূরণ করার মতো। তার কারণ হচ্ছে আমাদের দেশে যে ফিশারি ডিপার্টমেন্ট আছেন, তারা কাজ করেন মূলত হচ্ছে যুব সমাজদের ট্রেনিং করিয়ে হচ্ছে মানে মাছ চাষের পদ্ধতির উপর ট্রেনিং করানো এবং সেভাবে তাদেরকে কর্মসংস্থানের ব্যবস্থা করে দেয়া। কিন্তু বাংলাদেশে যে এত বিশাল বড় জেলে গোষ্ঠী আছেন, তারা এই প্রশিক্ষণের আওতার মধ্যে পড়েন না, কারণ তারা হচ্ছে ন্যাচারাল মানে প্রাকৃতিক পদ্ধতিতে তারা মাছগুলো ধরে আসছেন বছরের পর বছর ধরে। তো এই ক্ষেত্রে যে সমস্যাটা তৈরি হচ্ছে, যে সরকার যে ধরনের উদ্যোগ নিচ্ছেন মানে মাছ নিয়ে বা জেলেদের নিয়ে বা ফিশারি ডিপার্টমেন্ট যে ধরনের ফিশারিজ নিয়ে যে ধরনের উদ্যোগগুলো নিচ্ছেন, এই উদ্যোগগুলো থেকে জেলেরা, সাধারণ জেলেরা পুরোপুরি বঞ্চিত হচ্ছে, একেবারেই বঞ্চিত হচ্ছে।
Okay. Let me translate again. So what Appa was saying also shared earlier, that since most of the fishers actually they give labor to the stockist of the or the persons who owns the boat and the net, right? So it has no formal contracting process, so they are deprived of all the labor rights, basic even the insurance policy when they face in danger, since they spend most of the time in sea or the rivers during the times of disaster or any extreme climate. Even though they have lost their lives, they have not received any kind of insurance or any kind of support because their labor rights are not recognized. So one kind of human rights violation is happening, because they are not getting their labor rights, even though they are being dead, some of them, due to this kind of dangers or hazardous situations they have to face. They don't get the support, even though they do not get the support from the government. Also, APA mentions that once again, yes, though they are not formally contracted, there is no labor hour for them. So it has been often observed that they spend long hours in fishing. They do not have any timetable, but they do get minimal, wages, even though it's not even contracted. So, and also APA was also suggesting that they do not get any health benefits if any of their family members dies or faces any kind of medical emergency. They do not get support because of this, due to lack of recognition. Also, APA said that from also government departments, such as even though there is some kind of support given by Department of Fisheries, but it's very limited to aquaculture processing. It has been mostly observed that even though there has been initiatives taken from Department of Fisheries, it's mostly centered on giving training on youth on aquaculture fishing, not the small scale fishers benefits or their capacity building or any kind of support. So this is the lacking APA mentioned. I think we can move on.
Yeah, thanks Nujat, and thanks Farjana for
যেটি আমি
sharing.
বলছিলাম যে সরকার মানে ফিশারি ডিপার্টমেন্ট থেকে এটি না হয়।
Hi Farjana, I think we can come to these points maybe in the next session. So if you can hold on to those points for the next session. We'll move on to Dr. Veena Vidyadharan now, who is a fellow at CUTS International. So CUTS International have been very active on some of these issues at the regional and sub-regional level, working on fisheries, trade, and some of these cross-cutting issues. So I would like to give the floor to Veena now to share some of the experiences while working on these issues at the sub-regional and regional level. So Veena, over to you.
Thank you, Raj. It's a pleasure to be part of this prestigious forum. Now, coming to the subject, as other speakers have already mentioned, small-scale fisheries are an important source of livelihood, income, and food and nutrition security for millions of riverine and coastal communities across the world. And this sector is, deeply rooted in traditions, values, and local communities. Being a disorganized sector, it also faces a multitude of challenges, say decline in fish catch, competition from other sectors like industry, tourism, etc. They have left with few alternate livelihood options, and they are weakly represented in terms of trade unions, etc. Now, looking at the international framework, we have this UN Declaration on the Rights of Peasants and Other People Working in Rural Areas. This was adopted by the UN General Assembly in 2018, which kind of recognized the contribution of peasants and small-scale fishers in ensuring food and nutrition security, and also in biodiversity conservation. And it also acknowledged that access to land, water, and other natural resources are still a big challenge for the people in rural areas, mostly because they are not able to make their voice heard in relevant platforms to defend their human rights and tenure rights. It's also important to mention about the voluntary guidelines of Food and Agriculture Organization for securing sustainable small-scale fisheries in the context of food security and poverty eradication. And the guidelines actually goes beyond just fisheries. It's not just about fish, it's more about the people involved. It's about fish workers, fishers, and their rights. And small-scale fishers need to have secure and stable access to fishing grounds, and that's the most critical thing for them. Without recognized rights, there is a risk of competing interest, other sectors, like tourism, power production, industry, fishing, and even navigation. So let me just share some of the observations which CUTS had while implementing the activities under the regional program TROSA, Transboundary Rivers of South Asia, supported by the Swedish government and implemented by OXFAM. So I would talk about the conflicts which we have observed, especially with regard to navigation, tourism, cage fish farming, and value chains pertaining to right to life, right to livelihood, right to work, and right right to standard of living, etc. Now, in the remote areas of India and even in Bangladesh, there is a practice of using floating nets, and these nets often get drifted their way and enter the navigable channel, and thereby obstructing the vessel movement, and sometimes the fishing gears get damaged. And there is also a conflict of dredging, which Moina has already suggested in her talk, like the sand mining. So in dredging also, it disturbs the fish habitat, and there is a lot of noise pollution and water pollution due to the discharge of effluents from vessels, and noise pollution due to the noise of engine. So all this kind of reduce the fish catch which is available for the small fishers who are dependent on these rivers. Now, all these issues are, related to infrastructure development, sometimes initiated by state or sometimes by a private, in a public-private mode. But state's role is to enable business, to enable private sector participation, and so that has led to these kind of consequences. And when we say about private sector, there are different level of players. Like there are big players and small players, local traders, and here actually comes the question of inclusion. So whom are we talking about? For instance, if you take the case of cage fish farming, which is getting increasingly popular in India and in Bangladesh, this is an attractive option for landless farmers. Because they can use fish cages and net boxes for fish farming in open water bodies or in closed water bodies. In India, it's mostly done in closed water bodies. But the absence of leasing policies and regulatory measures and even large-scale promotion of cage fish farming has caused damage to this sector as well. Now, without binding long-term agreements on access rights, cage fish farmers are always under the threat of eviction. This is particularly true for the women farmers who are into cage fish farming. Now, here also there is a dynamics, like those who are doing in flowing water are mostly big players, big private players, and their engagement kind of cause the eviction of small scale fishers who used to fish in those areas of river. Let me take another example of a mega tourism project which is coming up in the state of Manipur in India, around the Lothak Lake. Now, this lake is a unique site, biodiversity hotspot with number of hundreds of species of plants, mollusk species, etc. Now, there were news in the media that the communities over there, they felt that they are not consulted by any authority before planning of such development projects. It's certain that this kind of development project component as well, because it's about the ecotourism project, and community is an important stakeholder in that. But the gap process followed. There are gaps in consultation and in consent and the remedy process which follows. So these are some issues which were highlighted in our work. And another issue is that the impact of pandemic on small-scale fisheries. So Kutch organized Nadi Baitaks, which are called river meetings, along the transboundary rivers of India and Bangladesh with the communities. And we were told that the fishermen were worst hit due to the pandemic. Because of movement restriction, they were not allowed to go to fish. And the lockdown period was followed by the annual fishing ban. So there is a ban period which is followed in India and in Bangladesh and many other parts as well, in line with the fish breeding season. So even after the unlock process started, people were afraid of buying fish due to the pandemic, and it actually reduced the market demand and the prices plunged, affecting the communities. Now, aquaculture farmers were most affected because the harvest was delayed due to a shortage of labor, market closure, and even movement restrictions. Now, if you look at the fish value chain, each and every stage is susceptible to the adopted to contain the spread of pandemic. And this kind of financial distress led to labor layoffs and reduction in working hours, and also reduced wages. So all this kind of impacted the livelihood and quality of life of the fisher communities in the country. Now, let me also throw some light on the regional aspects involved in that. When the borders were closed, the trade was hugely impacted. Now, India export and import fish from Bangladesh. I'm just taking the case of Bangladesh an example. And Bangladesh also, imports and export, like dry fish comes to India in great quantities from Bangladesh, and through various land custom stations, Bangladesh fish actually enters India. So the ban period and the closure of borders have also affected the trade process that existed between there is a 65-day long ban period in Bangladesh starting from mid-May to July, and in the Indian side it is from mid-April to mid-June. So there has to be a synchronization in the ban period followed in both countries, because even after following the ban restrictions in fishing and all, the fish catch is declining. So there is some reason behind that. One reason is, of course, non-synchronization of the ban period. The second one is what Moina again has mentioned in her session, like the use of this mosquito nets or other kind of nets which actually sweeps the entire seeds of fish from the bottom. So these are some areas which were highlighted during our work in under TROSA.
Yeah, thanks, Veena. Thanks for sharing those field level experiences, and also the impact of pandemic. I think that's one of the less talked about thing, particularly related to how the fish sector workers are impacted, and you highlighted those during your presentation. I think that was very helpful. Now I would like to invite Mr. Mohammad Kutubuddin. Kutubuddin Mohammed is the director of Sagar Seva, one of the research and advocacy institution from Dhaka and in Bangladesh. And he has been actively engaged in more rights-based fisheries governance, including ocean governance in Bangladesh and also in the region. And would like to invite him to share his insights and thoughts on ways like we can improve more business and human rights issues in the fisheries value chain. Over to you, Arju bhai.
Yeah, good afternoon, Raj bhai. Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for inviting me. And personally, in Bangladesh, I coordinate, as Raj bhai said, a small social enterprise called Sagar Seva Marine Extension Service. And globally, I am the communications coordinator for ICCA Consortium, an international association supporting indigenous peoples and local communities to protect their land rights and their rights in conservation, natural resources rights. So in Bangladesh, we advocate for businesses that do not violate the basic labor rights, economic rights, and environmental rights of climate vulnerable riparian and coastal communities. Communities where the way of life is itself ensure effective environmental stewardship. Especially, we advocate for businesses that are locally owned and help the small-scale fishing communities to secure their very basic universal human rights, such as the right to life, right to food, livelihoods, health, and education. And we see many opportunities that all businesses, locally owned or not, medium-sized or big businesses, have in the riverine, riparian areas, coastal areas in a small island. Opportunities to respect, to partner with indigenous, traditional, and small-scale commercial fishing communities Indeed, there are many opportunities to provide public extension services for fishing communities, climate vulnerable coastal communities, to help protect their basic human rights if the businesses are interested and compliant with domestic laws and international universal human rights standards. Now, before we go into that discussion about opportunities, I would like to talk a little bit about the context and the current environment where we are operating. I will share a quote from a very recent report. 20 indigenous and local organizations in Asia co-written this report recently, last month. It was published by the Rights and Resources Initiative. The report is titled Reconciling Conservation and Global Biodiversity Goals with Community Land Rights in Asia. The report analyzes the situation of the whole continent, not just South Asia. And of course, I know today we have in the audience, we have many colleagues and friends who are focused on rights like labor rights and land rights. And this is, the feature is indeed very related to labor rights and land rights. I quote, overall, the region epitomizes the political environment that favors businesses at the expense of human rights. Environmental safeguards and human rights are seen as detrimental to economic development and are overlooked when businesses' interests are favored. These challenges have been exacerbated throughout COVID-19, even as communities show resilience. So, in the context of economic and environmental rights and climate justice for communities like artisanal fishing communities in Bangladesh, India, and other South Asian countries, we got to talk about two kinds of businesses here. Firstly, the businesses that self-identify as business, the kind of business we know as business. And secondly, we have another industry, another kind of business that do not identify themselves as business. The first one, firstly, we got to talk about the largest economic sectors, streams of private businesses in coastal South Asia, businesses in fisheries and aquaculture, and other maritime businesses. But secondly, in relation to fisheries and human rights, there are a second kind of business, the international nature conservation industry. They do not identify as business, but structurally and operationally, these multinational organizations are another industry. The mainstream nature conservation industry must be seen and treated as an industry in the context of human rights and justice. And we got to apply the same level of scrutiny and expectations of transparency and accountability throughout the conservation supply chain that we do for any other multinational corporation. And I think right after this, in our discussion, we will have more clearer picture about how these two kinds of businesses we need to talk about and deal with. Because in the climate vulnerable regions of coastal and small island South Asia, for example, in Bangladesh, where we work, the basic and universal human rights of millions of people in fishing communities and other coastal communities depend on how these businesses operate, how they are allowed to operate, how responsible these businesses are about economic and environmental rights of indigenous and local communities. And what we got to do to make sure that these businesses respect human rights of fishing communities. I think before discussing that, the first thing we need to make sure, and I'm very happy that United Nations Forum on Businesses and Human Rights in South Asia allowed us to host this side event, because for some reasons, within the overall discussions and the space about human rights, these issues, the issues related to human rights of artisanal fishing communities are, I think, it would not be unfair if I say not very much discussion or focus are going to these issues. So I think this is good that we got this opportunity to discuss these issues here. But this is important because if we clearly take a look, in coastal regions, the most climate vulnerable areas in South Asia, low elevation coastal zone, fisheries and other related business and other business that have interfaces with fishery are the largest economic sector. And the largest volume of revenues are earned by many private businesses that has direct impact and relationship with these communities. For example, I think I am running out of time for this part, so I will be very brief. Two things. The first one is with this new focus on blue economy, that is seeing the aquatic space, the coastal areas, the rivers, and the marine areas as the new development space. We have this new stream, new wave of activities to transform the land rights, which include the rights to water bodies, including the rivers and coastal areas, is being very rapidly, very fundamentally changed. That who get to access, who get to use, who have the tenure rights over rivers, coastal areas, and offshore areas. And this has direct implication for the right to life, right to food, right to livelihoods, right to education of these communities, where millions of people, hundreds and thousands of families depend on these areas. We have very rich and strong tradition, and in many cases, very successful tradition of securing land rights of our small-scale farmers, of our peasant communities, other small-scale producers, when it comes in relation to the businesses. But we do have very little attention when it comes to fishing communities, and when the land rights is related to right to water bodies, and tenure rights. The second thing is, and the last thing I'll mention now, is the governments, as I quoted from the report, that business interest has always favored over the human rights and environmental situation. And we have this, the second kind of industry, the conservation industry. We have seen that any other environmental challenges, when it, if we see the prescription of multinational nature conservation groups, their prescriptions, if not always, mostly does not consider the land rights and tenure rights of these fishing communities, and mostly detrimental to the human rights of fishing communities. But in this kind of a space, civil society space and other human rights space, we don't see it as a threat, because we accept this multinational nature conservation group as like some good organization with well intention. But as I have mentioned, that globally we are discussing it, that because they are unaccountable and non-transparent, like many big businesses, so we should also start to talk about how we can make these organizations accountable. Similarly, we want to make the businesses accountable in these areas. Thank you, Rajbhai.
Thank you, Ajubhai, for bringing that very interesting perspective of the nature conservation is one of the areas for us to look at. But you also raised a very important point about blue economy. And I think it is in the context of the blue economy where there is a lot of investments, including infrastructure developments that's taking place in some of our coastal regions. The whole need for business and human rights is all the more important, because that's directly or indirectly impacting the rights of the small-scale fisheries and other actors engaged for their livelihood. So thank you, Ajubhai. Now, with this, we have sort of understood the experiences and insights from different levels. Now, in the next round, I would like to invite all the presenters to share some of their suggestions, one or two suggestions that they would like us to take forward as part of this conversation. But before I do that, I would also like to invite our participants. Please share your questions, your comments in the chat box. There are already two of those in the chat box. One from Mr. Ram Charita on the mercury contamination. I think that's a very important aspect in terms of pollution and the ways it is impacting the system, the ecosystems, and the rights of the community. So, if any of the speaker would like to engage in that topic, please feel free. So, with this, I would like to start with Shanta. If you can share one or two of your suggestions for us to take forward as part of this conversation. Over to you, Shanta.
Yes, Rajbhai. So I don't want to like point out the suggestions that much, because I believe that the other speakers will have more rich suggestions. But I want to say about that what we want. What we want is that the fisheries management that should be done in in a participatory way, and that should be a co-creation where all the stakeholders will be involved and their opinion will matter, including the grassroots fisher folks. And I believe that this is the only way that there will be the win-win situation, both if we think about the business perspectives and also in the human rights perspectives. Thank you, Rajbhai.
Thanks, Moina. Thanks for highlighting the need for more co-created solutions involving business groups, civil society, government, and human rights activists on this very important aspect of small-scale fisheries. Farzana, if I can invite you now for your suggestions.
Thank you. আমি সাজেশন নিয়ে যে বিষয়টা প্রথমে বলতে চাই যে যারা আমাদের মতো উদ্যোক্তা হিসেবে এই সেক্টরে কাজ করতে চান, বিশেষ করে নারীরা যদি এগিয়ে আসতে চান, তাহলে এর অনেক বড় সুযোগ রয়েছে, কারণ এখানে তেমন কোনো কম্পিটিটর নাই। ডিজিটাল সেক্টরে বিজনেস করার জন্য তেমন কোনো কম্পিটিটর নাই, এই ফিল্ডটা বেশিরভাগটাই খালি। তো যে কারণে নারীদের এগিয়ে আসাটা তুলনামূলকভাবে সহজ বলবো না, তার কারণ হচ্ছে এখানে ট্রেনিং এর অনেক বেশি ফাঁক রয়ে গেছে, কারণ ডিজিটাল মার্কেটিংটা নারীদেরকে জানতে হবে, বা অন্য যদি নারী পুরুষ নির্বিশেষে যে কোনো উদ্যোক্তা এই খাতে আসতে চান, যত বেশি আসবেন, যত বেশি তারা অধিকার সচেতন হবেন তাদের নিজেদের জন্য এবং ভোক্তাদের জন্য এবং জেলেদের জন্য, তাহলে হয়তো একটা কথা বলার একটা জায়গা তৈরি হলে তাহলে সমাধানের জন্য অনেক বেশি সাজেশন নানা দিক থেকে আসবে, এবং সেই রাস্তার দিকে আমরা আস্তে আস্তে যেতে পারবো। আমরা জেলে কমিউনিটিদের অধিকার নিয়ে কথা বলতে পারবো এবং তাদের জন্য হয়তো কিছু করার সুযোগ তৈরি হবে। যখন আমাদের কমিউনিটিটা বড় হবে, তখন হচ্ছে সবাই মিলে একটা সমবায় করার মাধ্যমে জেলেদেরকে ছোট পাইলট প্রজেক্ট হলেও যে তাদেরকে প্রশিক্ষণ দিয়ে বা তাদেরকে সহায়তা দিয়ে যে এই মোকাম বা আড়তদারদের হাত থেকে তাদেরকে কোনোভাবে উদ্ধার করা যায় কিনা, যাতে তারা নিজেদের এই ব্যবসা বা জেলে মাছ ধরা বিক্রি করা এই কাজগুলো তারা করতে পারেন। তো এই ক্ষেত্রে আমাদের দেশে যে বড় সমস্যাটা রয়ে গেছে যে ডিজিটাল মার্কেটিং নিয়ে যথেষ্ট ট্রেনিং এর কোনো সুযোগ নেই, যে কারণে অনেক বেশ কয়েকজন নারী উদ্যোক্তাকে আমি দেখেছিলাম মাছ বা অন্যান্য পণ্য নিয়ে কাজ করা তারা শুরু করেছিলেন ডিজিটালি, বাট হচ্ছে তারা অনেকেই সাকসেসফুল হতে পারেন নাই। তার বড় কারণ হচ্ছে তাদের কোনো ডিজিটাল মার্কেটিং এর উপরে যথেষ্ট ট্রেনিং নেই, কারণ এই ক্ষেত্রে বিপণনটা এবং কাস্টমারের সাথে রিলেশনশিপটা পুরোটাই ডিজিটালি করতে হয়। এই গেল এন্টারপ্রেনারদের জন্য। আর আরেকটি বিষয় আমি জেলেদেরকে নিয়ে বলতে চাই, আমাদের দেশে এখন আরেকটি বড় সমস্যা তৈরি হয়েছে যে জলবায়ুর বিরূপ প্রভাবের কারণে নদীতে যথেষ্ট পরিমাণ মাছ পাওয়া যায় না, আবার হচ্ছে দূষণ আরেকটি বড় ইস্যু, যেটি আমরা আমাদের রাজধানী ঢাকার চারপাশে যে নদীগুলো দেখতে পাই, সেই চারপাশে 4-5টা নদী, যেমন শীতলক্ষ্যা, মেঘনা, বালু নদী, এখানে মাছ বলতে গেলে একেবারেই নেই। তার কারণ হচ্ছে কলকারখানা থেকে সেখানে দূষণের পানি, নানা রকম বর্জ্য সরাসরি এসে নদীতে মিশছে। তো এই জায়গাগুলোতে যারা জেলে, যারা মাঝি হিসেবে যাদের জীবন পরিচালনা করেছে, তারা তাদের পেশা থেকে দূরে সরে গিয়েছেন। তো এই জায়গাটাতে এখানে তারা কোনো পুনর্বাসন সাপোর্ট যেটা সরকারের কাছ থেকে, সেটাও পাননি। তো এই সেক্টর নিয়ে যে একটু কাজ করা যায়, যে কিভাবে এই নদীগুলোতে প্রাণ ফেরানো যায়, সরকার চাইলে বা কোনো প্রাইভেট অর্গানাইজেশন চাইলে যে নদীগুলোর পানিকে কিভাবে দূষণমুক্ত রাখা যায়, যেখানে জলজ প্রাণী এবং মাছ আগের মতো ফিরে আসতে পারে, আর জেলেরা তাদের যে ন্যাচারাল সোর্স থেকে মাছ নিয়ে কাজ করার যে পেশাতে তারা নিযুক্ত ছিলেন, এটি তারা ফিরে পেতে পারেন। আরেকটি বিষয় হতে পারে, সেটি হচ্ছে আমাদের যে সরকারের যে উদ্যোগ আছে, মানে ফিশারিজ ডিপার্টমেন্ট, তারা শুধুমাত্র মানে যুব সমাজ বা নতুন যারা আসতে চান মাছ চাষে, তাদের নিয়ে কাজ না করে সাধারণ জেলেদের জন্য তাদের কিছু করা অবশ্যই উচিত। কারণ তাদের হচ্ছে নিজস্ব কোনো জমি নাই যেখানে পুকুর বা কোনোভাবে তারা হচ্ছে একটা জলাধার তৈরি করে মাছ চাষ করতে পারেন তাদের জীবনটা পরিবর্তন করার জন্য। তাদেরকে পুরোপুরি নির্ভর করতে হয় ন্যাচারাল সোর্সের উপর, আর সেখানে মাছ কমে যাওয়ায় তারা মাছ যথেষ্ট পরিমাণে একদিকে পাচ্ছেন না, আরেকদিকে মোকামদারদের দ্বারা তারা নির্যাতিত হচ্ছেন। তো এই জায়গাটায় যদি সরকার প্রশিক্ষণের মাধ্যমে খোলা জলাধার, মানে নদীতে যদি মাছ চাষের একটি ব্যবস্থা জেলেদের, সাধারণ জেলেদের করে দিতে পারেন, এটা খুবই সম্ভব। ভাসমান জাল দিয়ে নদীতে মাছ চাষের উদ্যোগ নেওয়া, এটার জন্য অল্প মানে সাপোর্টেই জেলেদেরকে এই জীবনে ফিরিয়ে আনা সম্ভব। তো সেক্ষেত্রে তারা এখানে মাছ চাষটা করতে পারছেন, যেখানে তাদের নিজস্ব জমির বা নিজস্ব পুকুর জলাধারের প্রয়োজন নাই। তো সেখানে মাছ চাষ করে এই মাছটা চাষ করার জন্য তাদের হচ্ছে কোনো মানে মোকাম বা আড়তদারদের কাছ থেকে সহায়তা নিতে হবে না, তাই তারা সরাসরি এই মাছ হচ্ছে ভোক্তাদের কাছে বিক্রি করে যথেষ্ট টাকা উপার্জন করতে পারেন। এতে তাদের মৌলিক চাহিদাগুলো ভালোভাবে পূরণ হবে।
Thanks, Farjana. Nushat, can you please help us with the translation and please keep it to 2 minutes?
I'll be very brief, Rajbhai. So, what Farjana was recommending that being an woman entrepreneur in fisheries sector, it was relatively new for the entrepreneurs who is doing online fishing business, especially for women. So, one good point is that there is no market competitors in this sector. But the thing is, even though even though it's difficult to get access to this market, they can manage, but they do not have mostly capacity to have the digital marketing side or digital the thing she mentioned, that they lack the capacity digital marketing. So they need capacity building training on this kind of digital marketing. Also, she suggested about, if this kind of small entrepreneurs can be unionized, and so that and along with the small scale fishers, and they can at least initiate a pilot project with the small scale fishers where there will be no middle person. So it would be a start to remove the all the injustice happen in the value chain of fisheries. And also she mentioned about to give more support to recommended about giving more support to small scale fishers, especially from the government side, since most of the government's capacity building initiatives are focused on aquaculture, not open water bodies. So also she mentioned about lastly that due to climate change and pollution, no fisheries are actually getting resources are getting depleted. So this should also be considered. So that's it from my end. Thank you.
Thank you, Nujat. I think her suggestions are very important from the perspective of looking at how the pollution and the climate change issues needs to be taken into account when we're talking about promoting business and human rights. And with this, I would like to now invite Veena for her suggestions.
Thank you, Raj. So I'll look at the points one by one, like the sector-wise conflicts which I was talking about. Now, coexistence strategies are possible in case of navigation and fishing. wherein the authorities involved in shipping and fishing have to work, jointly, have to coordinate with each other. More coordination is required among the authorities. The other thing is the marking of channels, so that to separate the navigation channel from the area for fishing, and also use low noise engine to reduce the low noise pollution, and the effluents that are discharged to the water are to be treated before getting discharged to rivers. So these are some solutions that can be adopted by the vessel, the cruises which ply in rivers to take care of the fishery sector. And coming to the developmental projects or tourism projects coming on river or water bodies like that, the key stakeholders are to be engaged at all levels. Especially consultations are to be done at community level, which is not happening in many cases. Now coming to the rights of cage fish farmers, special attention should be given to tenure rights of fisher folks, particularly women, and customary rights to aquatic resources and land of indigenous people and ethnic minorities. There should also be some policy framework to enhance women's opportunities and contribution to fisheries and aquaculture. Now, as I said, I also spoke about the ban period, synchronization of ban period in the upstream and downstream countries. When it comes to India and Bangladesh, it's important to engage with the state ministries, because again, fisheries is a state subject in India. So, the government of West Bengal and Assam, it's important to engage with state level ministries as well. Coming to the value chain aspect, it's important that cold chains and market infrastructure are there, because we have seen huge losses during the time of the pandemic. And again, the ban period actually it only takes few months away from the lives of say fisher folks. So to compensate the losses during this ban period, government has to come up with some measures, not just subsidies, some kind of assistance, credit services. Why they are more susceptible to middlemen? Because they are not getting credit services as required. So easy accessible credit service are to be available to fisher folks. And coming again to the regional aspect, when we talk about sub-regional cooperation and all, small scale fisheries also includes coastal fisheries or marine fisheries, and we have the BIMSTEC arrangement. BIMSTEC countries have agreed to deepen their cooperation in fisheries, especially the possibility of meaningful collaboration to promote sustainable marine fisheries, and also look at the how landlocked countries of the member states can benefit from inland fisheries. So these are some areas where the member countries have agreed for cooperation. And there is also BIMSTEC Weather and Climate Center established. Now this center is primarily for undertaking applied scientific research in weather prediction and climate modeling. This is very important in the context of climate change, because as you look at the data, the last 1 year, almost 13 cyclones. I just checked in the internet and found 13 cyclones were hit in the east coast of India. So just 1 year. So this actually leads to occupational hazards to those who go out for fishing.
Yeah. And so Veena, can you please wrap up in next 1 minute and focus it on more on the solutions part of it? Thanks.
Yeah, so the countries can collaborate for joint early warning system, weather forecasting, etc. And there is a need for cold storage facilities along the major custom stations as well, because the trucks which carry fish and all, they need to they wait for long hours during in the borders to get the clearance and all. So there's a need for establishing quarantine facilities and cold storage facilities along the border to facilitate trade.
Yeah, thanks Veena. Thanks for highlighting some of those regional level opportunities. Given the focus of the discussion on business and human rights, I would invite Archu Bhai, if you can give us a very specific suggestion on ways to engage the business community, the private sector, on the business and human rights opportunities and issues in the fisheries sector. So I think that would be very useful for this conversation. Over to you, Ashubai.
Thank you, Rajbhai. I think to begin with, we need a more clearer way how we can engage the businesses. Because if you take a look into the domestic laws and other international standards, it's already the businesses are expected to respect and not to infringe upon the rights of fishing communities. But that's just law, that's just the de jure situation, legal situation. But practically, I think from such forums, from civil society spaces, or UN forums like this one, and from human rights organizations, I saw questions about what the human rights organizations can do. So I think we should start to talk about, and we should have more clearer and consolidated standard so that we can present that to business communities, that these are the minimum basic standards if you want to be, if you want to comply with international laws, international human rights laws and domestic laws. These are the checklists. If you can check at least half of these standards and requirements when you're operating in areas where the small-scale fisheries operate, where the communities, the fishing families live, and also in relation to the second kind of industry that I talked about, the international conservation industry, that we should have some kind of similar standards, similar to the land rights standards. Probably many of you will know that we have a land rights standard put together by Rights and Resources Internationals, other land rights groups, other local organizations, and AIPP in Asia, Asia Indigenous Peoples Pact. So if we can have that kind of a standard, a checklist to present to the businesses, that to protect the labor rights of small-scale commercial fishers, if you are the owners, if you are other maritime businesses or businesses operating in riverine areas, for example, shipping and navigation, sand mining, or for example, coastal development, construction, and so on. We have so many new constructions going on in intertidal areas, coastal areas and riverine areas in relation to many development projects, particularly the Belt and Road Initiative. So yes, I think what I'm trying to say, similar to the land rights standard, we need this kind of it needs to be subordinate to other standards, but we should have more discussion and have this checklist of, for example, the best practices to protect human rights for businesses in areas where the small-scale fisheries operate. Thank you.
Thank you, Arju for bringing that up in terms of the standards and also mobilizing more awareness about the business and human rights and other standards that different actors, including the informal business actors, could use to better understand the human rights impact of their business, and they can identify measures to remedy some of those. I'm looking at the time now, and it would be good to have our colleagues from the audience share their insights and thoughts on this particular topic. I see two questions. One is on the mercury contamination, which is more related to pollution, but the whole issue of climate change and climate impact, particularly on the coastal vulnerable communities, and that brings in a different and very interesting perspective. And if I can invite Inam Bhai from Oxfam in Bangladesh, is the lead for the Climate Justice and Natural Resources Program, if he can share some of his insights and suggestions in 2 minutes time. And I'd also like to invite any other participant in this forum. Please raise your hand and feel free to share your insight, but please be very specific and take the time into account. Inam Bhai, over to you.
Thank you, Raj Bhai. Thanks for inviting me. So when we are talking about business and human rights, we know the three keywords: protect, respect, and remedy. And it's important to keep that in mind because there are other three words when it comes to businesses: good, bad, and ugly. So private sector and businesses are not really a homogeneous sector, and there are different sort of investments and interests going on there. And what we have seen is the benefits and profits that are being made right now in the short term is coming at the cost of these human rights. So it's by the labor exploitation, the environmental exploitation and all. It's by because people get away with that. The ugly business, they get away after they abuse human rights and environmental rights. And that's where focus needs to happen. As Arju Bhai was saying, that your protections are there, even without the UNGPs on business and human rights, there are legal actions that can be taken in the country, at least in the country that we live in. So those are also things that the human rights community needs to focus on. We don't see a lot of human rights organizations really focusing on what impact the businesses are having, especially in nuanced areas, not nuanced actually, quite big sector like the fisheries. So that's one. And now when it comes to what is in it, what is the business sector losing? So we talk about the ugly, but there are good people as well. So we perhaps didn't understand, like when Farjana Tusiapa was talking about, or Arju Bhai was talking about, they somehow also represent the private sector. They are talking like civil society members, but these are good people in the private sector as well. So how do we strengthen them? So because if we really look at businesses who look for longer term benefits, longer term economic transformations that will benefit themselves as well. So impact and impact businesses, social enterprises, how do we strengthen that? That's also important. What ecosystem we are providing for businesses that want to promote human rights, want to respect environmental rights. So those are important. It's important also because if you look at the climate change dimension, the future is changing. The business model that is working today will not work when we take this entire climate landscape, which requires many more discussions, not in 2 minutes. But that's where I think the ugly businesses who do not realize longer term benefits are going to fail for sure with climate change into play. The fossil fuel industry is not going to be beneficial in a situation where we will move to green energy. We will have to move to green energy unless they adopt. So unless they transform. So that's an area of discussion for the climate justice community, like from which I come from, but also really providing this alternative business model and strengthening these actors. I agree. I would like to agree to disagree with Arju Bhai that it's not just about setting standards and principles. It's really about on-ground actions and providing an alternative, because ugly business will find their ways to navigate through any principle that you give. But good business, even without the standards, they will do good if we just support them. That's my take, Raj Bhai. I hope that helps.
Thanks, Inam Bhai. I think that's very helpful in terms of bringing in this quite often these different groups working, the human rights defenders and the fishers group and others, the marginalized groups, having that space for dialogue and conversation and joint action, which Oxfam Bangladesh and other organizations they have started in Bangladesh, and I think that's a good example to look at, the Poitok and things that we have initiated as part of this. The other important key takeaway from this whole discussion is particularly looking at the sub-regional and regional opportunities, which Bina also referred to, particularly the BIMSTEC sector cooperation on agriculture and food security, as because this is a regional forum and we are talking about business and human rights more from regional perspective. These local examples clearly highlight the opportunity for us to come together on this quite less talked about topic, I would say, the fisheries. But as I was also alluding to in my introduction, the International Year of Artisanal Fisheries and Aquaculture, which is this year, and I think that brings in additional opportunities. The biodiversity, the global biodiversity framework being looked for from a different perspective now, particularly the human rights angle being embedded in the revised framework, that gives additional opportunities. and the opportunities for more multi-stakeholder cooperation involving business, think tanks, research institutes, and human rights institutions in the respective countries. So I think this is an opportune moment for all of us to work together and initiate this this conversation and also the collaboration, and focus more on promoting business and human rights in the small scale fisheries in South Asia, which is one of the key sector which is important for the region's food security, and also supports the livelihood of the millions who are engaged in this sector directly or indirectly. I don't think we have any other questions or comments in the chat, but if any of the participants would like to come at this stage, please feel free to turn on the video and share your thoughts. So let's wait for maybe a couple of minutes if we see some interventions. I don't think we have any suggestion or comments or questions in the chat. So with this, I would like to thank everybody, all the participants, particularly for your insightful comments, and all the speakers, Moina, Farzana, Veena, and Arjubhai and Inambhai, for your guidance and also for the thoughtful insights. And I'd also like to thank once again the UNDP Business and Human Rights Program for this opportunity for us to be part of this whole conversation. And we very much look forward to the main forum and ways we can all work together on promoting more business and human rights in this sub-region. With this, I would like to hand it back to Carl, I guess. Over to you, Carl.
Thank you so much, Raj, for that. Thank you to all of our speakers and to you, Raj, for helping facilitate. What a really great session. And we have many other great sessions coming up as part of this program for side sessions. So tomorrow, Walking the Talk, Stories of Collaboration for India's Informal Workers, Children in the Digital Era, and the role of businesses in terms of supporting and respecting their rights, and a series of sessions as well on Friday. So a really exciting agenda. Do visit the SAFBHR.com website to learn more about those sessions. We're looking forward to having everyone here as part of those sessions as well. But in the meantime, I'm wishing everyone a wonderful rest of your day, and see you as part of the other side events for the Business and Human Rights Forum for South Asia. Take care.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Take care, everyone.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.